Now I'm ready.
Oh, we're still recording. I'm not cutting any of this. I'm just kidding.
Absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely not.
All right, we're 4 minutes in, starting now. Hey, everybody. I'm Cody. Garrett, who are you?
Cody's best friend, Garrett Murphy.
There we go. And we are from Finding Freedom, a ministry of Better Equipped that specifically helps people just like you, men and women, who are journeying through kind of that sexual addiction journey, whether that's you struggling with that through pornography or something else, or you're the loved one, the spouse or somebody else of somebody who's journeying through it. So I hope that no matter who you are, that this is really helpful for you, that it helps equip you with what you need on this journey. And listen, we want you to have hope. We want you to find that freedom, and we want you to live in the light of Jesus Christ. And we're just here to be companions on that, whether it's you tuning in like this through YouTube or podcast, or maybe it's connecting with us personally. I know Garrett and I would love to be able to connect with you more specifically. You can reach out, email with us, set up a call, join a support group, whatever is what you need. And we can even help guide you in that. Maybe it's just talking first to just assess where are you at on your journey? What is it that you need? And we would just love to be able to be that encouragement, that kind of just somebody to spur you on in the direction of the Lord and what He has designed you to experience, more life and life to the full, to live abundantly in Him. And we've got to experience that in our lives. So that's a huge part of our story and testimony, is that we were so enslaved to our flesh and to sin and pornography and the shame and the guilt that came along with it. And God, through His grace and through the accountability and love and support and prayers of His people, we have found freedom. And we are years and years into this, and we have to choose to live in that freedom every day. But we are filled with purpose to help other people do that too. Right, Garrett? So this is
right.
What gets us excited. One of the things that gets us excited. And today, Garrett, I told Garrett that he's not even going to know ahead of time what we're going to talk about today. So Garrett, you ready for it?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. Today's topic is this. We're talking specifically to people who feel stuck, that they believe with all their heart that pornography is sin. They believe that it's unhealthy for them. And yet somehow the belief of those things is not enough to catapult them into freedom. They feel stuck. So we're going to talk about why. Why is that? And then what do we feel like is really going to help someone cross that bridge from head knowledge of, I know about it, I know it's wrong, I believe it's not healthy, to, and my actions reflect my belief. My behavior reflects my belief. Why is there a disconnect? So Garrett, when you think from that perspective, where do you think that disconnect comes from? Not really how to handle it yet, but why is there oftentimes a disconnect for a lot of people of, I know it's wrong, I know it's not healthy, but my actions don't match? What do you think are some of the reasons? I think there's more than one. What do you think are some of the reasons for people feeling that there's a disconnection from their belief to their actions and what they're doing?
I think with myself personally, and with most of the people that I've worked with in the past, it's simply a matter of their experience. They've had the head knowledge. They've known right from wrong. They've known that it was sin all along, most from the very beginning, and tried. They've given up on. I'm just using that as basic logic, and it's just going off their experience of failure. That's what most people would associate it with, is just simply a failure to abstain from it, to stay away from it, to flee from it, to have the self-control. There's so many different factors in there that go to just the cycle of I will always fail. I'll always be stuck. I'll always know I'm doing the wrong thing. So I think it just goes, for me, I think starting at age 10 to 30. So I had 20 years of having the knowledge in my heart and mind, and that cycle of usage and failure to just tell me, that creates that huge disconnect, that void of knowing it's wrong, but still returning to it.
Yeah. So I'll give an one of my thoughts, maybe two. And if you think of another one, Garrett, let me know. For me, I would say, in addition, again, there's many different ways this can happen for people, but I would say that somewhere along the line, one of the reasons is that we believe, or we don't believe that we can experience life, that basically there isn't another way to live, that this is the best that we can find or get, and we've settled for less, thinking that maybe God's promise is true for some people but not for me, or maybe maybe some people can access that but not for me, and that that this is just a part of how I experience life. So, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, that Jesus has come to give us life, and life to the full, or life abundantly. That we're not convinced that maybe God's way is in fact best, that maybe God is withholding the best stuff from us, that maybe the world actually has something better to offer. And I know and I'm talking about the lens of somebody who believes, like somebody who's already believing that this is sin and this is wrong, and they're not struggling with that part, but maybe that they're like, I don't know if that abundant life is really accessible for me. And they've kind of given up hope that there is, that's real, that's tangible. Maybe it's just hypothetical. Maybe it's just heaven later. If they feel like they could make it there. Again, I'm talking through a not healthy theological mindset of that, but yeah, I think there's just a lot of kind of hopelessness that it's like, that just doesn't apply to me. I just must not be one of those people.
Yeah. Well, I think that's extremely common. I completely agree with you. And I think it comes from those years of experienced failure or failed attempts, or years of what feels like, enslavement or addiction or whatever it feels like, or you want to call it. But I think that's a very common thing. There are so many different lies of it leads from, different people start in different places. Some might start and indulge completely without really feeling any sort of conviction or remorse or guilt or anything like that. Right. But the hopelessness just builds and builds. And I think many people do get to it's just something I'm going to have to live with. And I don't think it's attainable for me. I'm maybe envious of people that, that do seem to have found freedom or never even dealt with this.
That's for those super Christians, that's for those people, not for me.
Right. It's unattainable. I see that all the time in people, that thought, that lie. So another one I thought of is
you can have a lot of knowledge, a lot of biblical knowledge, a lot of convictions of what is sin biblically and what isn't. But then you just try to fight it with your own strength. You fight it alone. And I think that's what I've seen is most people that I talk to, up until they're about talking to me roughly, that's the route they've taken up to that point. And and it's like, well, and I say this with compassion. It's not going to sound compassionate, but hear me out. It's kind of like, well, no, duh. Like, you're ignoring much of what the Bible says of how we deal with sin in general, let alone something that feels like has a lot of power and a stronghold over us. You have to really erase a lot of scripture on how do we deal with life and sin and righteousness and transformation, sanctification. It is through the people of God, through prayer, allowing people to pray, through confession, allowing the power of God to transcend a lot of our brokenness. And a lot of that happens through kind of an openness, acknowledgement. Part of that repentance is really kind of being able to acknowledge that. And even with trusted people, trusted brothers or sisters. And most people they know the right answers, but that's a whole nother level to open themselves up to talk about it, to have accountability, to even explore what the world does accountability look like with this. And and I think the other thing, I don't know if it's paired with that. I mean, I'm sure it is, but they like porn. There's a lot of people, they're not sure if they really want that to disappear out of their life.
Yeah.
Like, of course, they hate it at the same time. I know, Garrett, you and I've talked about this. There's a love-hate, if we're honest, with pornography.
Right.
We love it. It's like a kid in a candy store. I mean, it's like, especially nowadays, you can click, 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 and you could, the world's at your fingertips. Yeah. Your fantasies are going to come to life on your screen. But, like, do you really want to part ways with it? Do you really want to hand it over? Do you really want that to disappear? Do you want to live without it? Man, a lot of people, it's like, I don't know.
I agree with you. I resonate with you on how I used to think and feel about that, because it's like, do I love porn or do I not love porn? Because I know I hate it, but at the same time, I literally can't stop thinking about it and anticipating and using it. And so, but what you've opened up here is, one is priority. Do I actually, what is more important? Do I go for the treasure that the Lord has in store for me, the freedom that He has in store? Mm-hmm. Do I sell everything that I have to and give that up for something so priceless, or do I let it remain in my life for the physical pleasure? And so then we start to talk about, it's our flesh. When we start talking about flesh and spirit and what the will of God is versus what our earthly fleshly will is, or I don't want to say will, but what our flesh is and desires here on this earth, as the Bible warns us about, we're really going to we have to learn to separate those two things as a part of our identity, because if we think our identity is the flesh, then we will remain in it. We have to understand the difference between the two. And that's a very difficult thing to especially do alone. But one reason people never get there is that, this day and age, most people, let's see, for the last, when was the iPhone came out, like 2007 or something like that. I think, but everybody's had Wi-Fi cameras, like pornography has become so much more available, social media, all these different things. And, we've been exposed to so much. Young people have been exposed to adult content for so long, and it stunted any spiritual growth. It stunted spiritual growth for me, and it came along further in life, but it stunted that. And so, for those who, there are many things in life that can really stunt our spiritual growth. Anything that's separating us from God, we kind of want to hide. We want to fix it on our own before we go to Him for anything. And so then as we wallow in that sin, the lies become more even deeply rooted, right? And then our identity is built in our flesh because we've kept God at a distance because we're ashamed of ourselves. And so I think you opened up a ton of stuff there with, and I think it's a great conversation to have with people about, like, do you even want to live can you imagine life without pornography at all? And is that something you want? I think it's a great question that we need to ask ourselves, because it's in that you can really pick apart. Then what part of you can comprehend it, and what part of you truly desires it to stay in your life or leave in. And we're talking about flesh and spirit. So
let's since we're talking to an audience, at least topically on today, that's like, hey, I have this head knowledge, I believe these things, at least informationally. Let's go back to the very beginning in Genesis, at least the beginning of us humans. Did Adam and Eve, this is kind of rhetorical, did Adam and Eve know clearly that they were not supposed to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Was that the head knowledge? Was it there?
The head knowledge? Yes.
The head knowledge. All right. So they're in Eden, in essentially the paradise of God. And I'm skimming. I've been reading a lot of books on this topic, so I'm skimming a lot of. I could go deeper here, but they're in this. Sin has not yet entered the picture, and they've basically been given one rule, one do not, and the rest is just like boom. Let's have at it, man. This is beautiful. Have sex and multiply. And that's be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, rule over it, eat of anything you want except for this one thing. The head knowledge was easy. They didn't have to learn, 613 laws. They didn't have to, it was like one thing. Just don't do it. And yet we find that there's a breakdown from that clarity of knowledge into something else. So for those of you familiar with that story in Genesis chapter 3, the serpent, the deceiver, the devil, and whatever form he took, meaning serpent, yes, but we don't know exactly what that looked like, but he comes and he starts using, attacking the truth, the internal dialogue out loud together. Garrett, I know you're familiar with that story. What do you think was the breakdown? Because I think it mirrors us. I've had my kids say, man, I wish Adam and Eve wouldn't have eaten the fruit, And I'm like, do you think, okay. So I said, have you ever done anything? Have you ever made the choice to do something that you knew you shouldn't do? Oh yeah. Like every day. And I'm like, but why? You know, you're not supposed to do it. And it's like, it's a profound question, not because I'm asking it, but it's like, what is the breakdown of, what do you think? Why do you think Adam and Eve, let's fix first on Adam and Eve, and then we'll move to us. Why do you think Adam and Eve, the knowledge wasn't enough for them? What did they believe about the enemy's words? Because he questions.
Well, yeah. And I think that they believed that there was something more, something better, something that was being withheld from them. And
yes,
in their flesh, they were tempted and desired to have more, more, that there's more I can, anyway, I think that's kind of just the root of it. There was a deceiver, there was a lie, and then it planted this idea of there's something else out there that I want or need. Right?
Yeah.
And it's just the twisting of the truth.
It's so true. I mean, Satan said, you will be like God, knowing the difference between good and evil. You will gain this power to know, to experience in a broader and deeper way, and you will not surely die. Well, the Lord said we'll die. Well, you will not surely die. Like look at porn once. That's not going to kill you. You look at porn 1,000 times. It's all right. It's just between you and yourself, you and the Lord, you and the computer, you and whatever. This isn't hurting anyone else, which is a lie, right? Satan wasn't telling the truth there. It brings death. And those of you who are listening and are, at some level indulging in this, you understand it is not bringing you life. It is killing things inside of you. The Lord loves you. He wants to bring you life, but that you understand, no, this isn't helping my relationships. This is not helping my walk with God and my relationship with God. This is not helping my self-confidence, my worth, my value, the shame and guilt cycles. But yet I think you nailed it, Garrett. I mean, and I mentioned that earlier too. It's God is withholding the good things from me. I want the fullness of heaven now. I want the fullness, and I want to be like God where there are no restraints. And I think about freedom, humanity's definition of freedom versus God's definition of freedom. Humanity's definition of freedom is there are no restraints from my desires. God's definition of freedom is there are healthy boundaries to keep us from indulging in things that bring death. Therefore, these boundaries to not indulge in, to not live into, allow us to experience the fullness of life and what is life-giving. and therefore we are free to live life to its fullest. And Satan says, no, to really live life is to have no restraints. That is what God doesn't want you to have. He's trying to hold you back from experiencing pleasure, to experience life and joy and happiness. And man, I think there's so much we can learn from that Adam and Eve as just one example. But you follow the Bible and it's like, oh, David and Bathsheba. I mean, you just keep going. Like, there's not a character in the Bible that you can find that doesn't, at some level, have a decision to make of, do I eat from the fruit of the tree that the Lord told me not to, that I know better. And that's where we find ourselves is, so what do we do about that? What do we do about that? We've already crossed the line time and time and time again, where we have made the choice to eat the fruit. And at this point, we're saying, I've eaten it once, I've eaten it 1,000 times. What's 1,001 more times? What's 1,002? What's 2,000 more times? What's the difference between 2,000 times and 1,000 times? I'm already feeling, I'm already in this sin. How does somebody make that? I don't want to call it a jump, but the transition. And again, I don't want to oversimplify too much, but principally, and this, because I think this is really the harder question. We've set the stage now.
Yeah.
How do we transition into that life and freedom from the head knowledge to the heart posture of freedom? That's tough, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much internally that has to take place. And then that will lead to some really practical, tangible things. And so, but again, they don't have to happen in necessarily. And there is no certain order. I can say that because I've seen it happen in different ways with different people. But there's what does have to happen, I believe, for true freedom to be found, whether it's quickly in deliverance of some sort or long term, is understanding the difference in what our identity is as far as our flesh and our spirit, the Spirit of God living within us. And then also to understand the difference in light and dark, and that with those are truth and lies. And so if everything starts to become seen through that paradigm of or through that lens, the perspective of what is light is what I will partake of. What is in darkness, I will not partake of. What is in the Spirit of God, I will partake of. What is in my flesh, I will not partake of, because I cannot trust my flesh any longer. I will not, and I will not partake in it. And we really have to. I remember wrestling with this. Really have to wrestle with, like, God, help me hate my flesh, and that for me, all right. I don't want to say that because it's like He created us, in His image, all these, but it's like, when I'm talking about my flesh, I'm talking about the side of me that He warns us against in the scriptures. Yeah. I'm talking about the part of me who wants selfish desires, who wants pleasures, who wants more and thinks there's never enough.
And you want it now.
Just want more.
Yeah.
That's right. That I had to identify the parts of the flesh, or I just labeled it the flesh, because I'm like, I want to be fully in the Spirit of God, to walk in the Spirit, for Christ to live in me. And so for that flesh has to be extracted, completely identified, and then forbidden to be prayed over, that my flesh does not overcome anything. I do not live in it. I do not believe it. I do not trust in it. And that it really becomes, I deny it. And without feeding the flesh, it will die. And I think that's a really critical part. And again, what I'm saying is that might happen. If that happens first and it's completely a spiritual thing between you and God, that's great. But then the practical and tangible things, I think some accountability, lots of conversation. Otherwise, the enemy creeps back in with something else that's going to tempt you. I do believe that the Lord wants us to have community. He wants us to have someone on this earth that we can confess to, not just Him, but people on this earth that we can confess to. Somebody that cares about us, loves us, that's praying for us, interceding for us, that can help protect us. Most of all, Him. Like I never say, as long as you have someone doing that, I always would like to point people to God first. But I think we're all better together, and there's many other practical, tangible things I think lead to that, but there really just has to be. For me, it's all about light, dark, truth, lies, flesh, spirit. I think that those things, if we can learn to see everything through that, we're really able to identify the battle that we're in and the enemy that we're fighting.
Oh yeah. So the wording I would put this into is, I'm going to give you kind of two big things I think have to shift to go from head knowledge to really heart action, belief consistently. I think you've got to readjust your identity and believe and actually accept the grace of God and the power of God over your life. So there's a lot of breakdown of, okay, how do we do that? Okay. But I think what has to shift is, God actually loves me and his grace is sufficient for me. Break the shame and guilt cycle. Yes, and believe that the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is given to me as a son or daughter of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
That if he can raise the dead, he can make a new life inside of me. You have to believe that and stop believing the lie of the enemy that you're too far gone. You aren't worthy, because we're not. But Jesus Christ has made that. So you have to really readjust your identity. So accepting the grace and the power of God. The second thing I'd say is that you have to actually believe that God's way is better and more life-giving. And I know we've talked about that a lot already in this episode, but you have to actually be convinced that the maker of the heavens and the earth and everything that is filled within it, including you and me, that he has designed us, and that therefore he knows how we are designed to experience the fullness of life, and therefore to find life, joy, peace, hope, happiness, all those things, that they're only found in him and that his ways are best. Therefore, you pursue that in him and not in counterfeit or what I would call idolatrous ways. These things that are not life-giving. They are metaphorically or literally just stone and wood items with no breath or life, but they bring death. That there is demonic power behind those things that are lifeless, but there's actually that Satan is using those to destroy, kill, and steal. And therefore, we believe that God's ways are best. So again, I want to repeat those, that we have to really accept the grace and power of God personally in our life as a son and daughter of Christ. And we have to believe that God's design and ways are best, not to be restrictive, but to really fuel and to give the gift of life into us. So I feel like most people I talk to at some level, all the discussion and wording and stories and, might be unique to each person's, but at the core of it, they've got to readjust their identity and they've got to believe that God's ways are best. And if you can get there, which you just can. I promise you can. Stop believing the lie that you can't. If Garrett and I can get there, I promise you can get there too. But if when you get there, I'll just say when you get there, dude, there's an excitement. Would you agree, Garrett? There's like a different level of almost adrenaline of pursuing, like, man, this is what it feels like to be alive. This is what it feels like to wake up or to go to bed without shame and guilt, to feel like there's a new way to live that I've believed exists in the Bible theoretically and maybe for some people, but it's for me and I get to taste it every day in an increasing fashion. And then once you taste it, Garrett, for you and me, once you take the people I know who've really tasted it, they want that for more people.
Absolutely.
And then that's another level of life and fuel, is not just experiencing for yourself, but being like, it's like Oprah, you can experience it. You can have a car. You can have a car. And that's the way I feel, is like, I talk with people. It's like, no, it's for real. It's for real. Yeah. You can have it. Yep. And it's fuel to like, not just stay on the journey yourself, but to help other people on it too. And when you cross over from head knowledge to heart, connecting the head and the heart, and it's like, oh, dude, like I want more people to taste this, because that's real life. It's not limping along with cotton candy instead of real meat on the bone. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, this is real living, man. This is real life in Christ. And it's not that I'm perfect or you're perfect, but like, oh, dude, no, there is power.
Absolutely. It was far sweeter than anything I had tasted before. And it, what's strange is I didn't even expect it. My heart desired to live without the guilt, without the shame, to live in God's grace and God's mercy, to live in those things. But from the age of 10 to age 30, never really feeling that. So what it felt like for me, when I did, those are great points. When I did readjust the identity, when I did accept God's grace and his power, and truly come to believe the things that I had the head knowledge of, that they were for me, right? That it changed everything. It was the transformation in my life. It's like, this is what it feels like to feel like you're reborn, that you're born again. It's everything's new. The slate is wiped clean and you can think clearly. For me, it's like the light finally came on. I wasn't dwelling in the darkness. It didn't like all the things I thought I was in the light. I wasn't. Like, it's just like I can finally see clearly. And man, did it bring such joy and life into my world, even though it was a pretty crazy, it was insane. I mean, after telling my wife after 10 years, like, that should be one of the hardest times of your life. And instead it was, it was the most joyous time of my life, because I was now walking with the Lord in his grace, in the power, as you said, that rose Christ from the dead, that it was now available to me, and it always had been, right? But there's that level of belief. So I'm really glad that you hit on that, that our belief is what keeps us. Our belief and acceptance of that is what keeps us from walking in freedom.
Yeah. So listen, if you're out there and you're saying, I believe that God is who he says he is. I believe his truth in his word, the Bible is true, but I felt this disconnect. I pray that today that you are filled with hope, that you are filled with hunger to experience that in a way that maybe you never have, and that you don't feel alone. And we're not just people out on the internet that aren't in real existence, that we are people, Garrett and I, who would love to encourage you in that, who would love to help spur you on, to help you break the chains of sin and guilt and shame, and invite you into the true life that Jesus has died and resurrected to secure for you. He's inviting you into it. So accept the invitation, get excited, get stoked, and reach out to us. You can reach out to us at findingfreedominlight@gmail.com. And you can always go to our website at betterequipped.net/freedom. You share this out with more people, not just this episode. You can do that, of course, please, but share this resource. This is a free resource for people to be able to listen in, to get spurred on, to get their wheels turning, to maybe break these thought cycles that they've had for so long. And we want you to experience what is not just accessible for us. It's accessible for everyone, anyone who believes that Jesus has done what he said he's done. And man, so thank you for joining us. We hope that you'll join us on the next episode, and we hope you'll reach out to us really soon. We'll see you later.
That's right. See you guys.